Why is there so much earthquake activity at this moment in time? So hi everyone, welcome to the live stream. In general, this video is not going to be just about this earthquake. I just wrapped up another video and I saw comments on my channel saying, did you hear about the high magnitude 7 earthquake? And so as many of you know, probably everyone here on the live stream knows that I jump on these things when they happen. And so sometimes I have long days. And other times there's stretches where there's not much to do. And so I can do research and study and stuff. So today is one of those long days. But I'm here to just talk about what's happening because it's more than just an earthquake. It's just right now a general sense of kind of tension and release that is happening with the entire globe, I would say. I mean, massive earthquake swarm right now in the Aegean Sea in Greece, right next to Santorini volcano. And there's a ton of people like, you know, I'm not one of the professional geologists in Greece who's been studying that area for decades, but you know, I know a few things. I'm not completely clueless. I do know one or two things. And they are saying it's not volcanic at all whatsoever in Greece. And that's fundamentally not true because it's in a volcanic zone. It may only results in earthquakes, but there's fundamentally volcanism driving the orogeny, you could say, of that area. So there's a lot of people that are gaslighting on certain things right now, and we see this massive just upwelling of earth energies in general. So I'm not going to claim that I know exactly what's happening. I am just another human on this planet, but maybe we can get a little bit closer to the truth. Tune in to Gaia and just try to understand what she's telling us with all these earth energies right now. So that is what we're here for today. And the big shocker today is this magnitude 7.6, one of the strongest earthquakes that we have had in years. Because the last strongest earthquake that's more than magnitude 7.6 goes back to the magnitude 7.8 and magnitude 7.5 double sequence in Turkey, actually almost about 2 years ago to the day. That was on February 5th and today's February 8th. That was 2022 right now. No, that's 2023. Yeah, is that right? Was that 2022 or 20? That was 2023 and now it's 2025, of course. So 2 years ago, almost to the day, we had that 7.8 earthquake and 7.5. Now we have a 7.6, but different part of the globe. The Americas are shaking, broadcasted out through the Caribbean. Let's check out some of our USGS data. And so here we have the map, the latest earthquakes map by the USGS. And one thing I want you to note right from the get-go is that, okay, here's our 7.6, right? Let's put this on so it's only earthquakes on the map. You'll notice we don't have a strong aftershock yet. You have a 4.8, 4.3, 4.2. Those are tiny little things. When you get a high magnitude earthquake, let's say it's a magnitude 7, typically your first aftershock, not the first one, but the strongest aftershock that follows will be a magnitude 6. So you drop one. You go from magnitude 7 to a magnitude 6. Sometimes you can have like more of a sequence of lower magnitude earthquakes. So if you had a magnitude 7 main shock, you could have, let's say, 3 aftershocks that are magnitude 5.5, something like that. But typically it steps down 1. This is 7.6. So if we just do the very simple math, 7.6, drop it down 1, we get to 6.6, or let's just say 6.5. These are only like not even reaching magnitude 5. So we're still waiting on an aftershock from this. Now it's not guaranteed, but it's a pretty certain thing. It happens almost every single time that earthquakes kind of follow these physics. But the aftershock can take 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours to materialize. So keep that in mind. So we've already had a magnitude 7.6. Now the chance of this being a foreshock and the main shock actually still coming, being 1 magnitude higher, is very low. That's very low. Because we can look at the historic seismicity and we see that we don't get earthquakes really much bigger than this in this area. Here I've drawn a map for the Caribbean here, And I've set this actually go all the way back to like the 1500s. So we get the historic record. And you'll notice here, largest magnitude has already been set and the highest is a 7.8. And that was in 1946. We see that more right over here, Dominican Republic. And you'll see, we'll talk about the geology, we'll see that it follows the outlines of this Caribbean plate too, which is really nice. But if we go in towards our latest earthquakes, let's put newest first. Here is our 7.6 from today, just hours ago, just like 3 hours ago. And then we see another one right nearby, that is a 7.5, and that was back in 2018. So actually we just had, on the geologic time scale, a pretty large earthquake, if you look at that. Then if we go a little bit further to the west, that's a 7.3, that was back in 2009. If you go to the east, which is over here, and that is showing a 7.7 back in 2020. So actually we've had quite a lot of high magnitude earthquakes in this zone just recently. Then this one right here, 7.1, goes all the way back to 1917. So this area has been very active. It will continue to be very active, but just again, you'll notice if we go back to largest earthquakes first, you'll notice that from 1500 to now for this area, nothing is greater than magnitude 8. And you'll see most of them are clustered here along the subduction zone. So this is a different geologic setting. I mean, they're related, but this is a subduction zone, and then this works a little bit differently. So you'll see most of them are clustered there. So definitely a big surprise for today. I think everyone's so focused on Greece that we're all, at least I am, I'm just like, whoa, okay, there we go. Because the cumulative, right now the cumulative magnitude for all the earthquakes that are occurring in Greece is about a magnitude 6. This is a 7.6, so it's already echelons higher. Though the swarm's a little different. You know, it's continuous rumbling. If you're actually there, check this out though. America is shaking. Let us look at what that means. We have a fabulous graphic here showing the seismic waves propagating across America. And here we have it for the 7.6 magnitude earthquake. First we get the P wave. We see that right there. Then we start to get our shear waves to move across, even reaching up into Alaska. Then check out when the main body of this comes in, the surface waves, the amplitudes jump up way higher and they propagate out across. So I can rewind that a little bit for you guys. Check out these surface waves coming in from that 7.6 earthquake. And when they hit very strongly and propagating up just like that. So very big earthquake, the largest seismic signal, in fact, that the Americas have probably had in a long time, because a lot of the other big earthquakes have been further out. I'd say the last big one that sent shockwaves was this magnitude 7.0 in Ferndale. So I guess that would be the last time the Americas got a big seismic shake on this sort of scale. But we see this coming in from the Caribbean, going through the Gulf of something, the Gulf of Mexico, America, and then, or the Gulf of America, basically. Well, I mean, it's the Americas, the Gulf of the Americas, and then going up through like this. So really quite incredible. And if we go to the biggest energy system in the solar system, we may have an explanation for why we had this magnitude 7.6 earthquake today. It's because we had a coronal hole right here. Big coronal hole on the sun. And there is this connection, a correlation between really big earthquakes and coronal holes. I actually just talked about that in the video I released on the seismic update in Greece, which I just pushed out like an hour ago. Talking about how this coronal hole and how we've been having these coronal holes could be indicative of there perhaps being some sort of big earthquake event coming up. And if the earthquake swarm off the coast of Santorini is acting as a foreshock, then perhaps we have a magnitude 7 earthquake coming up in Greece because of a variety of dynamics. We have tidal forcing with the full moon coming up on the 12th. We also have these coronal holes which load the earth with energy. We've been having these coronal holes for a while. And so we see often with these giant earthquakes, which are magnitude 7.5 and greater, we often see them being preceded and accompanied by coronal holes, which aren't always on the sun. They are fairly frequent, but they're not always there. They're not, always present. And so we have this big coronal hole also right along the equator, which is important because you can have coronal holes way up here, way down there. Their high-speed streams aren't going to interact with the Earth, but here's one right along the equator that is about to buffet us with a high-speed stream. We've already been hit with some high-speed streams, and so this could be one of the factors at play. If we look at our recent flaring, we have had some solar flares recently. That's also been charging up our global electric circuit a little bit. Nice flare sequence right there from this big sunspot group 3981, which is now finally starting to rotate out, but still kicking and screaming the entire way. And we have some new activity rotating in. These sunspots aren't the biggest, but they are starting to come in. We have some bigger sunspots on the far side that should appear in view in about the next 2 days. One estimate was for tomorrow, the 9th of February. I think it's more likely to be February 10th or so. So we'll just have to wait and see about that. But we do have some flaring still active on the sun, and we could have some new sunspots basically come in right as these ones rotate out because they're about 180 degrees apart. I also want to look at our coronagraph because we'll see something really cool there. Now we have a question from Brandon saying, that line you drew from the Caribbean to the West Coast is interesting. I wonder if this is an indication of shakeups within society in all areas that the ripple wave hit. Yeah, so if we think about this perhaps a little bit more metaphysically, the question could be, are we seeing this big earthquake in the Americas, Mexico, United States, Canada, because of perhaps some connection that we have with the earth in terms of our society and the issues that are surrounding, the Americas. Right now we're entering into this trade war with Canada and Mexico. And, it's a fitting metaphor, at least. Kind of a symbolic thing to see this massive earthquake hit in the Caribbean right off of the Gulf of Mexico, which is trying to be renamed to the Gulf of America. And also, before we go over to our coronagraph, I want to make a point here too. Also, the closest place that it struck, right, of all the places, the closest one that it hit was the Cayman Islands, which is the center of ultra greedy money and the broken financial system and wealth inequality. So I just find that very funny, that it almost struck target right there, basically. But let's go over to our coronagraph because I want to show you the Mercury Cazimi that is happening right now. And there is a connection between planetary geometry and earthquakes. And well, lo and behold, here we go. We see it. We're seeing it right now. We're seeing Mercury perform a superior conjunction with the sun, really going exact tomorrow, but basically in less than 24 hours. We see it nearly there right now as we're doing this live stream. So right now we have Mercury and the sun conjunct. So you can look into the archetypal symbology of that, perhaps some of the promises of that, maybe work with that a little bit. But Mercury's passing on the other side, moving very quickly. If you remember, I made a video about a week ago now saying, everything's beginning to accelerate. And as happens with almost every single video, people are like, oh, this is such clickbait. You're just making stuff up. Well, have things accelerated? We had a massive earthquake swarm start in Greece. We've now had a magnitude 7.6 earthquake in the Americas, right? We had some insane solar activity with that Giga Chad sunspot group and sunspot group 3981. We've had a huge acceleration in all the things. And so you can look at some of these factors, right? And you can make some pretty good assessments as to where things are going, which is exactly what I did. So that's what the Planetary Resonances e-course is all about. If you really want to be better at understanding this and have a little bit of a heads up on stuff, take that course, and then you'll be able to understand what's happening with the planets and their energies and how they're changing. That's the whole reason I made the course. So I know you'll love it if you sign up, because it's helped me tremendously in delivering better informational reporting for all of you here. So thank you all for being here. Much love. Let us look now at the geologic setting for the area. And we have that right here, just so we can get a quick glimpse of it. Because it is quite interesting. If you've ever been to the Caribbean, it's a wonderful place. There was a tsunami alert that was put out for this, but thankfully that was basically retracted. We can see that right here really quick actually. So there was a tsunami alert, NOAA issued. There is a heightened chance of some waves coming in, maybe like a meter taller or something, but basically no significant tsunami from that magnitude 7.6. The question you may be asking is why? Why is there no big tsunami? It's a big earthquake. Well, if we look here, we see that this part of the Caribbean is a strike slip. So we have the Cayman Trough, and we see that the plates are sliding by each other right here. And so for you to get a big tsunami, you need some sort of uplift on the ground. And usually with a strike slip fault, there'll be some component of vertical motion with it, but it'll just be a very slight percentage of the total movement. So most of that motion along that fault was moving past each other. Same with the Ferndale earthquake up in Northern California back about, what was that, October? I think that was October. That magnitude 7.0, that was also a strike slip at the very distal end of the San Andreas. So both the big earthquakes that have hit the Americas recently have both been just kind of like the plates sliding by each other and not creating any like outward ripples, you could say. I mean, these seismic waves are propagating, but in terms of like tsunami threat, both of them, they've hit the ocean, right? Both of them though, no tsunami threat from them, which is good. Here we see South America, we see Central America, we see this strip of islands here, right? And it goes down, and so you have the Caribbean plate in here, and it's kind of wedged in between all these different forces because you have subduction coming up right here. You have the American plate. You have the American plate here too, but it's like the Atlantic side, right? You have the rifting that is over here that's creating this subduction. So you have this great arc right there. Just a lot of factors at play at the Caribbean, and so it's a very active area as we saw with that historic map. Also, what they didn't show with that is like the Port Royal earthquake. It was like a high magnitude, probably magnitude 7.5, maybe even 8. It sunk like 2/3 of Port Royal, hundreds of years ago. So there's very active tectonic forces in the Caribbean, and we saw a glimpse of that today. So we can look actually at our latest GOES 19 imagery to see this Mercury Cazimi. I can pull that up. This is pretty cool. It's a good thing that we have this now. Where did I put that though? Oh yeah, I put that up here. Because we have a new coronagraph in orbit available to the public. So let's check this out. This is cool. Go back to our display capture, and here is our CCOR1 coronagraph hosted on the GOES 19 satellite, which is out at the L1 Lagrange point. And maybe if I do that, you can see that a little better. And this is for the past 24 hours, and we see Mercury now emerging out from this central I guess like support for the camera or something. That's one of the big problems with the CCOR1 is that they have this really big kind of support line there. But they also have that with the SDO one. So Mercury is going like this, but you'll notice that the solar wind outflows have been basically calm for the past 24 hours. So nothing significant in terms of solar wind, but we have this Mercury Cazimi in play right now. And this is going to be great because this is like a much higher resolution look at the solar wind, at the solar corona and more. And this is what we'll be looking at going forward primarily, which is fantastic. Now I also have, I think I have something else. Yeah, I wanted to, let's go back to our seismic waves because I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about the different types of seismic waves so we can understand kind of the sequence for an earthquake. So we can all be a little better prepared when if an earthquake does come to your area, right? So here is this 7.6, the epicenter, and we see how the seismic waves have propagated across the Americas. And you'll notice this waveform here. It first starts off with just a quick jolt. That is the P wave, a compressional wave. Then you have a shear wave that is a slower velocity that follows. The P wave is the fastest velocity. You have the shear wave that follows, where there's more of a shearing motion to it. It's also higher amplitude. You'll see that here. The amplitude starts to increase, and then you'll notice this big high amplitude body of seismic waves. Those are surface waves, of which there are various types. And so those are the slowest, but they contain about 70% or more of the energy of a seismic event. So if you have an earthquake, this P wave can give you a heads up as to whether something's happening. So if you feel a sudden jolt and shake, that could be a P wave or the P waves from a big earthquake. The other thing that could happen if you get a sudden jolt or shake is that could actually be the surface waves from a smaller earthquake. So it's hard to tell in that first 5 seconds what's happening. So it's always good to just be prepared. And if you feel something shaking or a jolt, to quickly scan your situation and do the best thing possible. When I was in Mexico and down in Oaxaca, there was a magnitude 5.1 earthquake. And that was in fact the first earthquake I've ever felt, because both the big earthquakes that occurred in my hometown back in 2000, also 2014, I had left the day before they occurred. So I missed the magnitude 5 and the magnitude 6 that occurred that shook everything up in my hometown. So I was in Mexico and I was out on this terrace with a pool, and I was just chilling. I was on vacation, and I felt this jolt and this shake. And I was like, is this going to be a huge earthquake? Because being a geologist, I was like, is that the P wave? In fact, that was just the surface waves that rolled through. But if that had been the P wave, then the surface waves would have been much stronger, and I was worried about the whole complex sliding off the hill because it was a pretty steep slope. So thankfully it wasn't, but that's the type of, you have to be prepared for this stuff. And so I was quickly gauging what's the best thing to do. And then, nothing else followed. So let us look at the different types of seismic waves specifically with some animations. This is what a P wave looks like effectively. See how that's compressing in this kind of motion like this? The particles are actually getting compressed closer together, and then it radiates out, and that's the fastest because it doesn't have any really extraneous movement to it. Next you get shear waves, and this is a shearing motion. So the particles are moving past each other like this. Shear waves do not go through liquids, so you'll lose them in anything that's liquid. But a P wave can move through a liquid or a solid, no problem. But shear waves, they do not go through liquids basically at all. You also have surface waves, and those are similar to S waves or shear waves, but they have higher power and they do have some different dynamics. So here we have horizontal surface waves, which are called love waves. And you see that the ground is actually translating. See how it's translating, right? It's actually translating across horizontally. Then you have Rayleigh waves, and you get kind of this rolling motion with them. And these are the most destructive. This is vertical displacement. You see it's very strong vertical displacement. And it's this main body where you get a continuous sequence of waves from the surface waves. So that's effectively what happens with an earthquake. You get this whole sequence of P waves. Notice that there's not much actual vertical ground motion. Then you get the shear waves, which are a little bit more, and then the surface waves, by far the most destructive. And if we go back to the surface waves, right here, the risk to a building will depend on the frequency of the waves and the resonant frequency of the building. And so, for example, if the resonant frequency of this earthquake, its strongest amplitude is at 5 hertz, and you have a building that also has a resonant frequency of 5 hertz, it's coming down because of resonance. The energy will just start to amplify, resonance amplification, it'll bring it down. But if the building has a resonant frequency of, let's say, 1 hertz and the earthquake is 5 hertz, it's more likely to be the opposite. But regardless, if they are different, then the building's less likely to enter into that resonance amplification and have a collapse or something. So that can happen with bridges or whatever, right? Anything that we can construct. So that is Stefan, it's the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, I mean, it's been the Gulf of Mexico my entire life. It's the Gulf of something. It's a big Gulf, Gulf of Texas. Or as they say in the South, it's just the Gulf. It's just the Gulf. So, why is he talking about the 7.6 when they had two 8.0s just 3 hours ago? No, we only had a magnitude 7.6. At least I'm not seeing any record of a higher magnitude earthquake. Maybe it initially came out as a magnitude 8 and then they revised it to a more accurate 7.6. Thank you, Missy, for the super thanks. Yeah, thank you so much. And at this point, I think we're good to get into the question and answer. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, then go ahead and get started. And let's just talk about in general the Earth energies and why there is this amplification occurring at this moment in time. Because it seems to be significant. We've just had this explosion of earthquakes over the past, really since February began. Really with the start of February, boom, earthquake season. Which is odd because typically you don't get that during solar maximum. So again, if you want to ask a question, type @Stefan Burns and we'll get to it. The first question is, how far across the US do these waves go? And the answer to that is that these waves actually propagate out globally. So we're just looking at their movement across North America here. But these waves are, you know, a large earthquake. Anything about magnitude 4 and greater can be picked up by a high sensitivity seismometer around the globe. And that's how we have the global earthquake observation network and system that's been installed. But a magnitude 7.6 definitely will be picked up anywhere across the globe by a good seismograph. I actually just bought a seismograph. If I had, let's say, a house in my backyard, I would have it set up permanently and I would have picked up these waves. Actually, being right here, I would have got some really good data out of that. But my seismograph is just not plugged in right now and it's not, you know, I have my geophone. You have to sink it into the ground, that whole deal. But these energies are felt globally. So questions are rolling in. Again, @Stefan Burns. Then type your question so I can see it. And I will get to the next question, which is, how far would this have shaken nearby countries like Honduras? And so let's go to our USGS map, or rather a Google Earth map. And we have our earthquake epicenter here. Let's type in Honduras to get a precise location on it. Here we have Honduras close by, and in fact, if we exit out of this really quick, just keep that in mind where that is, right? And we go to our specific map here, we see that some of that seismic energy was picked up in Honduras. And so that's what's interesting about this earthquake right here, is that it basically happened in the exact center of this entire part of the Caribbean. And so a lot of that energy dissipated before it started to hit the different islands or Central America like Honduras here. So that earthquake perhaps was felt in parts of Mexico, but not so sure. We could go back and there is a did you feel it map, but this just happened. So I'm not sure we're getting any real reports of this yet. Looks like some people have reported it along the Yucatan Peninsula. Let me go to the satellite view. And that should be here. People reporting it further in. People reporting it in Jamaica. Looks like we got a few reports, even a few reports over here up to Puerto Rico. Even some reports in Florida. Look at that. Some people felt a very light shaking. Keep in mind, this is not a strong shaking, right? The intensity, we see that right there. But some people are reporting that they felt that across the Americas. Even some further up too. Look at this. Even a few people up here making some notes. And then these people up here are probably just imagining things. I don't think you're going to feel that earthquake all the way up there. But definitely we see some good high quality did you feel it reporting right there. So that answers the Mexico and the Honduras questions from Jennifer and from Anita. Thank you so much. Andy asks, do you subscribe to David Wilcox's solar flash / ascension theory? No, I do not. We have plenty of evidence of super flares, and here on Earth, we have evidence of Miyake events, which could be caused by a super flare. Also could be caused by some sort of cosmic event. Let's say a supernova explodes nearby. That could trigger something like that if the gamma ray beam is aligned with the planet. But we don't know what that's going to do. We don't know what it's going to do. And to be able to predict something, I personally, I'm not on board with that at all. So I think that's really, I think it's really brash. So no, I don't really subscribe to it. But do these solar energies affect us? Yes, absolutely, right? But do I think there's going to be some massive explosion on the sun in 5 years imminently that is going to take us all to the 12th level of heaven? No, I don't. Are they common in the Caribbean? Yeah, I talked about that earlier. LANC, and we can just quickly go back to a historic map. We see here all the earthquakes going back to 1500. Some of them aren't listed, but we see that most of them are along this kind of ring there, and then a lot there. This isn't the Caribbean anymore, but nearby. I did not draw the box, or maybe I did draw the box up to Florida. I'd have to go back to my search. Let's see where I drew that box. Yeah, I drew it up pretty far. So yeah, I can even expand that out a little bit. Go a little further this way too. Let's do that. Let me search that again. And yeah, so you see that this area is not active, but because of the Caribbean plate, this area is. So yeah, we do have historic earthquakes like that. And you'll see that some of them, we go to our newest ones here, newest first, of course, today. And then we see some others in this list here, 2021, 2020, 2020, 2018, 2018, 2018. And so yeah, they're fairly common. We have a lot of questions. Do you think the U.S. will experience an earthquake? We're experiencing earthquakes all the time. The question is of what magnitude and where. And Milo Running Wild is asking, might this possibly trigger a caldera eruption? You're probably referencing Yellowstone. So that's the thing with earthquakes. They do load stress onto other faults because you have the actual seismic waves, which are energy waves, propagating out, and you can trigger other faults to rupture from big earthquakes. But it's not that big of an effect. It's definitely exaggerated by, I would say, a lot of people that maybe use that to their advantage in terms of, creating some sort of narrative. But we know that does occur. But in terms of like an earthquake like this, all of a sudden causing Yellowstone way up here to explode, no, that's not really going to happen as far as I know. I mean, but not really, because these are different scales, different systems. By the time the energy wave gets there, it's so weak, it's insignificant. The constant rumbling of the geothermal field and the geysers is probably more significant. But both of them are just, it's all about creating rock fractures for, any sort of volcanic system to migrate upwards. And there needs to be a certain level of like pressure release where things depressurize and get really explosive. And so earthquake way down here is not going to affect that. What's the URL for the site behind you? The one showing the animation of the wave propagating? That is just a collection of videos that I combined together to create that slide for you. Why do we not see earthquake sensors in Canada? The P-wave chart you showed today didn't show anything in Canada. You can go back there. This is because this is relying on the United States of America seismic network. And so it's just, it'd be nice if we had this data graphic for all of them. I'm sure someone could create that. If they are really good with Python and they've taken all this data, they could crunch it and create a visual like this. But this is one that is put out. This is an animation that is put out very quickly after large earthquakes, showing the movement through the American seismic network, the United States of America seismic network. It'd be nice if they added Canada in there. Looks like there are a few little ones, but yeah, the density on this could be much greater. That would be nice. Have you looked at the full moon coming up for key areas like Santorini? I have. And I think the effect is more significant in terms of, for the full moon, I think it's more significant in terms of just the fact that it's going to be increasing that tidal stress due to ocean tides and earth tides. And with that being such an active earthquake swarm, I'm definitely looking at that a little bit more closely as I outlined in the video I just released. Make sure you go watch that after this, everyone, if you want even more of this earth goodness. But in terms of like astrocartography, I didn't see anything super significant with it. I looked closely. I didn't see anything that really kind of hit my alarm bells. It was more about the charts, the overall charts that kind of triggered my alarm bells, because the astrological chart for 1956, July 9th, that magnitude 7.8 earthquake in the Aegean Sea, right next to the swarm, is very similar to the full moon chart coming up. And in fact, they actually ping off each other. So, you know, I talked about that a little bit in a video a day or two back. I could make an entire video on that if I wanted to. I may do that for members only though. So if you remember, if I make that video, members will be able to watch that. We have a ton of questions here. Koi says, make the sun behave. I could try, but I kind of like a wild sun personally. I think it's a little bit more fun. And then Anzac asks, could the Santorini situation, if it erupts, could it affect La Palma, in which a large portion of the island's mass fall into the sea? Well, La Palma, let's type it in. It's pretty far away. Here's La Palma, and we'll switch back here. And it's part of these islands just off the coast of Africa. Some people think is Atlantis. And you'll notice that this is very far away from the Aegean Sea. So something happening here is not going to affect something happening here, as far as I know. We have Miss Jenny Lee asking, the surface waves are at the strongest along the Pacific coastline. How does that affect us? Well, again, once you have an earthquake, that far away, you're not really feeling it. But these seismic networks are very sensitive. So they're picking up these waves, but you're not picking them up. Maybe energetically, if you're super sensitive, I'm not going to rule that out, right? I'm not going to tell anyone that that's not possible. But in terms of like worrying about your home or things falling off the shelves or something, from that 7.6 earthquake in the Mediterranean, or not Mediterranean, the Caribbean, that's not a concern to be worried about. And from Fanta Ranja, the moon was right in the middle of Jupiter and Mars in the sky. What are the archetypes of that arrangement? So you must be talking about the current planetary geometry where the moon is passing between Jupiter and Mars before getting to that full moon. Because Mars right now, yeah, exactly. Well, if we just have to quickly go at it, Mars is about, actually here, we can pull this up for everyone so we can see this. If we type in, what is it, Stellarium? Web. And we'll be able to see where the moon is right now. Let's go to it. And there is our night sky. And I'll step over here for you all. We see Mars, the moon, and Jupiter. And actually, it's like this. So here's Jupiter, Mars, and the moon. It's passing this way. So right now the moon is in between Jupiter and Mars. Jupiter is all about expansion and growth, and Mars is a very, it's an energy that's very strong and slicing, likes to break things apart. Very much representative of like an earthquake and a rupture, right? Breaking that fault apart. And the moon is representative of the earth and the rhythms and one of the main agents for earthquakes. So it is interesting that we have, and also Uranus there, a planet of disruption and change. It is interesting that as the moon passes in between these three planets, we get that very powerful 7.6 earthquake. Interesting. You know, if you know the archetypal symbology of these planets and you go through that sequence, it lines up pretty nicely. But you have to suspend your brain a little bit. You have to suspend the left brain a little bit to make sense of it. Because you have to utilize your right brain intuitive side. What about Greece? It's still shaking. Cactus, I would recommend you watch my latest video I just pushed out about that because I just spent a whole bunch of time making that video. It'll be much more thorough and precise and in-depth than it will be for me to just do a question and answer on it. So check that out, Cactus. This is the last video I just released. And Thomas says, I'm in Milton, Florida. I think I felt it before 10 p.m. It's possible, you know. If you can have a timestamp, maybe you like sent a text message right around that time. If you can like reverse engineer what time you felt that, then you can check when that earthquake ruptured, the 7.6, and perhaps you did feel it. People are reporting that they felt it in Florida, which is, you know, it's not that far away. If you're especially like right down there, you're not that far away. Veronica keeps getting messages about a very large amount of water displacement on the globe. If our tectonic plates shift enough in Central America, will we see a change in sea level? Well, if you get a large earthquake and you get this uplift, then you can get a tsunami. But in terms of sea level changing, we would need either a big change in the temperature on this planet, because as the temperature increases, water expands. That's where you get most of sea level rise. Or we would need there to be a big collapse of the Greenland ice sheet if we want sea levels to go up. Because this is the last big ice sheet. This one in the north, and then of course also Antarctica. So they would both need to really start to diminish and collapse. All that fresh water would get liberated and the ocean would get bigger. Now, if we wanted sea level to go down, we would need to see a big expansion of these ice sheets like we had just recently in geologic time, let's say 15,000 years ago. We would need them to expand out. And so that is going to be that paired with changing temperature, because again, water will either expand slightly or contract slightly based on the temperature, whether it's higher or lower. But in terms of some sort of earth shift, you're not going to get, you may get a tsunami, but some sort of earth shift is not going to change the water, like the sea levels appreciably on the globe as far as we know. And a lot of questions, I'm going through them. It's a very active chat. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, people. I'm doing my best. But is the increase in earthquakes a typical cycle, or is it greater than cycles of the past? Well, there is one thing. There's a little bit of misinformation out there on earthquakes increasing, which is that we've had this increase of earthquakes from like the 1900s, and it's just been going up and up and up and up and up. The reason why we've been recording, like in our data records, we have more earthquakes recorded is because we've been deploying these seismic networks. And so we've just been actually observing more earthquakes. Doesn't mean they weren't happening before. It's really just because now that we're more observant of this, we've been noticing more of them. And now we have a really good worldwide seismic network, you could say, since the 2000s, especially because they deployed all these minor ones across like countrywide. And we really haven't had an increase in earthquake frequency since the turn of the millennium, because we've had these networks pretty well established by then. So it's really more so a question of having more seismometers and seismographs in these stations than it was earthquakes actually increasing frequency across decades and decades and decades. But we do have times pulses of earthquake activity, like today, like the past week or so, right? We've had thousands of earthquakes in Greece in just like less than 2 weeks. So like they're estimating like 10,000 plus earthquakes here in just less than 2 weeks. So that's a huge transient pulse of earthquake activity. But eventually that will fade away. And in general, the background level of earthquakes seems to stay fairly level, though I'm sure on long geologic timescales that does change due to variations in plate tectonics. Earthquakes probably go way down when you have a Pangea type supercontinent, but we just don't know. Richard asks, is something wrong with the Earth? What is the root cause of this? This is just the Earth releasing energy. So we're seeing there's energy stored in the lithosphere and now it's being released. Or in the case of something volcanic, let's say this is a volcanic intrusion. It's because magma is coming up, causing these fractures, and as a result you get these earthquakes. But it's a different energy force. You have this movement of like heat and energy from deeper in the planet coming up. But you always have that happening. Just there's variations upon variations upon variations. We have another super thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm going through the questions. Any updates on the East African geological activity that was happening end of 2024? So that is over here. And yeah, that has cooled off, but that does not mean that this story is over. Geology takes time. It could take decades. But what we saw was a massive volcanic intrusion over the span of a few months in the East African Rift Valley, specifically right around Fontali and Dauphin volcanoes. And we had, those videos showing all the activity that resulted from that. And so what we often see is these volcanic intrusions like come up and then things cool off, and then 6 months later or 2 years later, they reemerge. But if we're talking about a big Earth event here, which is possible, but if we're talking about a big Earth event, this could unfold over decades. Let me grab my book really quick. Actually, I have it right here in front of me. I use it as a weight for my laptop stand. This is a great book just on basic geology, and I actually am making a video. I'm going to make a video on the African situation with the earthquakes there. But I can quickly go to that page and just give you a little bit of a heads up on what I was going to talk about there. I think this is it, yeah. Yeah, here's talking about rifts and everything. Because that could be the start of a very big geologic process. Let's just put it simple like that. Why do volcanoes erupt? There's a whole bunch of good stuff in here. Basically, I'm not finding it immediately to actually read from the book. But basically, at times we see the creation of these volcanic provinces, like the Deccan Traps in India, or the Columbia flood basalt, where you get this just movement of magma up from the mantle and the core, and it just spills out just endlessly, just nonstop, 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 and it puts out a massive amount of material. We're talking thousands of cubic kilometers over time, and that has dramatic effects on the climate. And so it's happened in the past, and it's going to happen again in the future. And so what we're seeing in East Africa perhaps could be that. Just the very beginning stages. We don't know. It could be, though. We can't just say it's not. It could be. But that unfolded over, like the Deccan Traps unfolded over millions of years, right? The Columbia flood basalt took a long time for that to occur. So, so this is an ongoing story. It's not like it's just one and done. I think most people they haven't studied geology, so they have this very human time perspective. But once you study geology, you understand geologic time. It's a much longer process. So keep that in mind. Julie asks, have you seen any reports of water receding in Greece? Can the uplift really give visible differences? There were some people from Turkey talking about water receding, but honestly, I've lost a little bit of faith in humanity with the New Jersey drone sightings, because people were pointing at airplanes and saying, oh my God, it's aliens. And other people were pointing at like Venus because it's a bright light. They're like, oh my God, it's a drone. So, I wouldn't be surprised if people were like, the water is going away, and it was actually just the tide pooling out. So I didn't look into it that much, but I just would not be surprised by that, because I haven't seen follow-up reports on water changes in the Aegean Sea. And if that was something that's actually happening, right? Like they've evacuated Santorini and some of these other islands that are close by. But look, there's there's a bunch of islands here and you have all the coastline. If there was something really significant happening, thousands, millions of people, right? All these people here would be like, what the heck is happening? And no, we saw like 2 videos from tourists in Turkey saying the water is leaving. So maybe I'm not up to date on that story, but I don't think we're seeing any changes in the water levels in Greece as far as I know. But to answer kind of the other half of your question, okay, we have Santorini volcano, we have Colombo volcano, we have these other little volcanic things, we have the swarm happening right here. Is there uplift happening right in that zone? That is what we basically don't know right now. They've started to deploy sensors and everything, but that is a big question of uncertainty. And it's not likely that there is yet, because most of those earthquakes are occurring from 20 kilometers down to 5 kilometers down. Very few of them are up in that top 5 kilometers. If this is volcanic, it's not happening yet in that top 5 kilometers. And that's what you would need to see that uplift. Do you think that solar activity is related to the many earthquakes worldwide? I do. I do think that there is this connection, especially because right now we do have this coronal hole. We've had a ton of solar activity. And what we see with solar activity and earthquakes, it's really more about how it loads the planet continuously. And so the thing with a coronal mass ejection and a solar storm impact and a geomagnetic storm is that it's a pretty transient thing. You have this impact for 2 days or a day and then it's done. Coronal holes are seen to be very well correlated with strong earthquakes because they're continuous influence. They're constantly emitting a high-speed stream and it's always being kind of like pushed into the earth. The interesting thing is that this sunspot group right there was so active across its entire trip. So in some aspect, perhaps it did kind of act like a coronal hole because it was constantly flaring, emitting much higher X-ray flux for a long duration of time. So perhaps that's connected. Perhaps it's connected. That's all I can say. I just want to wrap up with kind of like a final thought on the situation, which is that we've had a tremendous amount of Earth energy release now over the past week. We've had a tremendous amount of solar activity, and that's just going back months now because we're in solar maximum. And so a lot of people are feeling this, and there's kind of 2 things. There's people that are realizing that they're feeling this because a lot of symptoms or just effects, you could say, are misidentified, and also they're kind of like ghost symptoms. It takes time for some people to recognize what they're feeling and why. For example, when we had some really big solar activity, I was talking to my aunt and she was having terrible like sciatica in her leg, and she's had hip replacements, or knee replacements, sorry. And so that was 100% because it came out of nowhere. It came out of like nowhere super fast. She's like, oh my God, this nerve pain is terrible. Well, nerves are electromagnetic and she has a whole bunch of metal in her leg. And so you get a huge like solar storm and yeah, you're probably going to start feeling it. But she didn't know. She didn't know that until I told her. And then I told her the dates and the time and it perfectly lined up because she used to be an emergency room nurse. She has all this stuff in her mind. And so a lot of this stuff is misidentified. The other thing too with all these energies is that it presents a real opportunity because we're in a very profound period of change. In my opinion, I think that we're in a big period of change. We see that signature archetypally with what the planets are doing. And we also just see what's happening on our Earth itself, geophysically and also societally and more. So I think there's an opportunity in that for developing and expanding your own consciousness. And the best way to do that is to go out and practice earthing and grounding, regulate your breathing, optimize your own resonance and your rhythms. And all that is totally free to do. It's wonderful. You can do that anytime, anywhere, but outside is best. And that will help you connect to Earth and perhaps be moved around where you need to be moved. If you maintain some sense of fluidity and grace, even while all this change is happening on the planet, I think you'll be guided to go where you need to go. I know I can speak for that from personal experience. And so that's basically what's led to this channel, is because I started to tap into that intuition and I followed that, and it led me to study into the Earth more and leaving my job to go into more of a kind of a global, you could say, profession where I'm communicating with people all around the world. Thank you all for being here. And so those energies are going to be really strong all the way through the end of solar maximum. We even have a big planetary conjunction. This would be Saturn and Uranus in 2032, and then things go quiet for a while. And so there's a big opportunity here. So there's a bunch of things you can do for that. I think honestly, again, just the best thing is earthing and grounding, and making sure you're fit in your mind, in your body, and in your soul. I also have, for example, spirituality, which is amazing for helping you to connect to these energies. Because in general, the way that they work is that once you establish a connection, you're connected and you can get back to that. But it can be perhaps a little difficult for some people to establish that connection. And sometimes the connection is more of that caustic connection where it's causing these health problems rather than like epiphanies, you could say. So spirituality is great because it helps you to balance your health and your wellness. And builds that like Earth-Gaia connection, and it really works with you through your dream state. So it helps you sleep and it helps you have more dreams, more vivid dreams, and that's where you can get these intuitive downloads, and you can start that acceleration process of that spiritual evolution journey. It's very simple. It's blue lotus flower, it's chamomile, it's mugwort, it's passion flower. Boom, you steep this 15 minutes, you drink it frequently, as whenever you want, with meditation or earthing or grounding, or even just before you go to bed to help you sleep. And it will do all that. And then if you want to add some flavor to it, if you want to boost your immune system, fruit tea is an excellent combination for it. It's strawberry, elderberry, rose hips, hibiscus, and lemon balm. The lemon balm goes really synergistically with spirituality. So these two combined are kind of like your intro package if you want to start to connect to Gaia energy and understand this more. And with so much of it available right now, like what downloads you'll get are going to be yours and your own, right? Everyone gets, she's a super consciousness. What she's going to give to you is going to be specifically tailored to you. And you can get that without any of this stuff, right? You can get it even just kind of out of the blue if you're like meant to. But this stuff, if you're resonating with it, can help you like maintain that connection more often, and definitely in your dream state by activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So I recommend you go to the website, wildfreeorganic.com. Check this out. Other herbal products I have, all organic. I make them myself. They're charged with all the best energy. People love them. Check them out. That is it for today. Glad to have helped and provide some information for you and for jumping on this live stream. Crazy 7.8 earthquake, or 7.6 earthquake today in the Caribbean. Really quite unexpected. But here we are. We're in a Earth amplification. I've talked about that. So not so expected. If you have been subscribed to the channel, you are well in the know as to what is happening on this planet and the energy amplification cycle that we are in. And we have more of this to come all the way through 2025 and 2026. So just keep your ear on the ground. I think that is going to be valuable to you. And I wish you all the best luck and success and abundance going forward. Send you all lots of love and light. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Make sure you go watch my most recent update on the situation in Greece.